Who is wide receiver one for the Packers in 2024? Join us as we discuss this talented wide receiver group and who could be number one for this upcoming season.
I've been wanting this shit forever. I've been in the field with whatever they throw at me. Brush it off, pick myself up, moving on to the better. Hey. Ain't no errors, baby, it's a new era. I wake up early feeling rich like I'm
All right, everybody, thanks for being back to Sounds Gouda. This is episode 7. I'm Jordan Olson. I'm one of your co-hosts. My best friend over here is Rob Ralph. We're excited to have you back for another episode of Sounds Gouda today. We drop new episodes every Thursday on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again to all of our returning listeners, and thank you to all of our new listeners who are joining us for the first time. We are excited to have you. And in today's episode, as we've already alluded to, we're going to talk about who could be or who will be wide receiver one for the Packers this season. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rob, and he's going to give us the lowdown on the Packers roster in terms of that position.
Yeah, thanks, man. So obviously 11 wide receivers on the roster, and those 7 of those wide receivers you will be more familiar with. But Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks, Bo Melton, Malik Heath, and Samari Toure, and then some other ones on the wide receiver roster. And you might not know too much, but hopefully know Grant Dubose was the 7th round pick last year from Charlotte. Julian Hicks played at Albany, Akron, and CMU and was a mini camp invite. Our favorite quarterback to wide receiver, Alex Magoo, Florida International, former quarterback. Will be interesting to see how all that plays out. And then Dimitri Stanley, Iowa State, and he was a mini camp invite, and also caught the eye of Matt LaFleur with a one-handed grab. Pretty special for those guys to do that stuff. So we're going to go through just a little bit of the stats, and just for the top guys this year, because realistically we think there's going to be those top 5 guys, and then they might stash a few more away, but really just going to be those top guys, and we'll go through those now. Jaden Reed, so games played 16, games started 13. He had 94 targets, 3 drops, 64 receptions, completed percentage of 68.1. He had 793 yards, yards after catch 335. A reception average of 12.4, so pretty darn good. And yards a game 49.6, and he tied for reception touchdowns with 8, and then his longest of the year was 59. So going on to Romeo Doubs, and just for clarification too, just to let you know, we are using Fox Sports for this as well, as another resource for us to be able to pull these stats. So just heads up. So Romeo Doubs, games played 17, all 17 games. Pretty awesome. Games started 16 though, 96 targets. He did lead this group with 6 drops. Doesn't sound like it's too much, so not too big, but he did lead this receiver group with that. 59 reception yards, 61.5 percentage of completion, 67.4 reception yards, yards after catch, only 134. So if you remember me talking about Jaden Reed from before, 335. That's almost triple what Doubs got. His reception average for the year, 11.4 yards a game, 39.6 he averaged. And then, like I was alluding to from before, 8 reception touchdowns with a long of 36. On to a lot of Packers fans' favorite, Dontavian Wicks. I'd say all these guys are the favorites, but Wicks is definitely one of those on X for a lot of people. Games played 15, games started 6, targets 58, He only had 3 drops, 39 receptions, 67.2 for completion percentage, 581 reception yards, 210 for yak or yards after catch, for reception average throughout the year of 14.9, yards a game 38.7, and he had 4 reception touchdowns with a long at 35. And we go on down to Christian Watson. Games played 9 out of the 17 games started. He started all 9 of those games. 53 targets, only 3 drops. If you do remember, the big thing with him coming out of college was that he was going to be struggling with drops. So not too many, but also he only played about half the season, right? So 28 receptions, 52.8 completion percentage, 422 reception yards, 105 yards after catch, reception average of 15.1. So obviously that speaks to a little bit of his speed. 46.9 yards a game. And then he had reception touchdowns of 5 for a long of 77. So no surprise there. The dude's got speed. And then on to Bo Melton, our favorite back of the year addition. I believe we got him from the Seahawks. I know he's one of my favorites, but played really well. He had 5 games that he played in. He started 1, 24 targets. He only had 1 drop. I didn't really see him drop the ball too much. He almost felt like he caught almost every single one. I can't even remember that one he dropped. 16 receptions, 66.7 completion percentage, 218 reception yards, 37 yards after carry, for a reception average of 13.6, yards a game 43.6, and the reception touchdowns 1 with a long of 37. Now we're going to go a little bit to, we had a few votes on X just to test out the listeners and see what they had to say and what they thought was going to happen this year for wide receiver 1 for the Packers, as well as some PFF grades.
Yeah, so we're excited to interact with our audience on X and hopefully some of other Packers Nation. But we put out 3 polls: who would lead the team in receptions, who would lead the team in touchdowns, and who would lead the team in receiving yards. So Dontavian Wicks was the fan favorite for receptions on the year. Christian Watson and Dontavian Wicks were tied in that vote for total receiving touchdowns for this coming year. And Christian Watson was the favorite from our listeners for yards this upcoming year. Just a couple other things before we really dive into our discussion, which I think that's the really exciting thing about this topic, is that there's a lot of real interesting ways that we could go with this discussion. There's not a clear-cut number 1. We're going to try to give that to you later, who we think our number 1 each could be this coming season. But there's a lot of guys in this discussion. PFF grades for last year. So Christian Watson scored a 69.1 and a total PFF grade. Jaden Reed quite a bit higher, 75.1 as his PFF. And PFF stands for Pro Football Focus. For those of you who don't know, it's a great website that covers a lot of advanced analytics. One of those I'll share in a moment about Dontavian Wicks, so I might as well talk about him now. But he had a 78.4 PFF grade. He had the number 1 individualized grade against man coverage, though. So not only as a Packer, but number 1 in the NFL in creating separation against man coverage. So he was open 55% of his routes, which is pretty amazing. And if we can find a way to utilize that this coming year, I think that's why a lot of people are really excited about his potential. I know that he has a lot of Devontae Adams footwork comparisons, and if we got a Devontae Adams in the 5th round in Wicks, then we're going to be pretty well set at this wide receiver position. Romeo Doubs had a 68.9 PFF grade last year. Bo Melton had an outstanding 88.1. That is a much smaller sample size. He did only play in those 5 games. But I don't think that Bo Melton is a flash in the pan. I think that what he showed in those games, his separation, some games that he really stepped up against, like Rob and I were talking about the Vikings leading up to this, outstanding in that contest. I think he could be a real factor this coming year. Malik Heath, he had a 60.1 PFF grade. We're not really going to talk about him a lot this year. I do think that he makes the roster, if I had to guess right now, as wide receiver 6 for what he can do in the blocking game. He had that amazing touchdown reception in the Giants game that we unfortunately lost against Mr. Cutlets himself. I already forgot what that guy's first name is. Help me out, Rob. Is it like
I don't remember the Italian
Tommy
guy.
Cutlets? Yeah, Tommy DeVito, right, from
Yeah,
Illinois. Just as
there you
having
go.
a temporary brain fart. But yeah, Tommy Cutlets cut us up on Monday Night Football. But I remember that amazing catch where Heath grabbed it at the goal line and extended it. Great play. And then Samori Toure, a 60.6 grade. He really played very limited snaps on the season. And unlike Bo Melton, I don't take a lot of stock in that other than a 60.6 grade is not all that great, which is probably why you didn't see the field a lot. All right. So a couple other things that I thought were pretty interesting. Christian Watson, as I look at his stat line here, and you gave his numbers, but 52.8% on his targets. Only had 3 drops though. So what does that mean? Interesting that it means really Jordan Love and him weren't connecting very frequently. You look at Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks, they were connecting at 68 or nearly 68% of the time. So almost 20% more often. I don't really know what that says about Christian Watson. I know that some of his critiques early on, besides the drops, were maybe some of his route polish on expanding his route tree. Maybe he's still working on those things. Clearly, the athleticism and the speed is there. But if he can stay healthy and on the field this year, I'm going to need to see that number increase to see him be wide receiver 1. We took him at pick 34. What would be 2 seasons ago now. This will be his 3rd season in the NFL, and he's obviously got all the potential in the world. So I think every Packer fan would really love to see him rise to the top and be the cream of the crop of this Packers receiving core. What else did I see here that I really thought was interesting? One thing for me is that I take into consideration a guy like Romeo Doubs, which isn't getting a lot of fan love right now. But I think Romeo Doubs is a favorite of Jordan Love and somebody that he's been thrown to in some really critical positions. He came on at the end of the year, had an outstanding game against Dallas. Really had a good playoff game against the 49ers as well, even though he didn't record a touchdown. Had some amazing, basically faith, throw it up prayers from Jordan Love. And he was in the right place. He trusted him to be there. Saw a lot of those back of the corner touchdown, back shoulder fades. So I think there's a lot of trust between those guys. It'll be really interesting to see how the trust between somebody like Jordan Love and Romeo Doubs compares to the guys that he got an offseason with now, right? And Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks and some of those others. So Rob, let's kick this off a little bit and see where this gets interesting. But who do you think is Packers wide receiver 1 this year? Maybe you don't have to give your answer yet, but what are some of the things that you're taking into consideration, or who do you think leads the team in some of these major statistics, whether that be receptions, touchdowns, or receiving yards?
I mean, just going over this exercise too, I didn't forget about Jaden Reed, but man, He's really good, and his yards after catch is something that really, stood out to me. I think he was second. I think he was second on that list. Super impressive. Mainly a slot guy, but they can move him around to some jet sweeps, as well. They can be creative with him. Really love what Jaden Reed can do. You were alluding to it too as well, but Romeo Dobbs seems to have that connection with Jordan Love. Played really good games against the Bears. He had that one of those back shoulder ones against the Steelers. Played really good in the playoffs. I'm probably missing more than a few, but seems to just always be in the right spot at the right time. And I think is slightly underrated, even though that's crazy to say on this team. Bo Melton, love that guy. Just to come in when we were just injury riddled, getting him off the practice squad from the Seahawks, almost just catching, everything. And even that, that game going into Minnesota, and him having that one game he started, just super fast, good route running. Was a really good wide receiver for them. Caught a touchdown pass right against the 49ers in that game. Really, really love that, especially against the 49ers. Dontavian Wicks, man, you're right on his route running. Unbelievable. What he can do against man coverage, outside a little bit, inside at some times, just mixing it up to where he's going to play, and always seems to be open. And he's definitely one of the best route runners on the team, and create a lot of separation that way. So I love myself some Wicks. Loved that touchdown that he had against Dallas in the playoffs, all out pressure. Jordan Love changes the protection at the last second, all out blitz, and boom, just a couple seconds, boom, and beat Gilmore on the inside on that route, and just absolutely love that. Who else am I missing here? Did I hit all of them?
I don't know. I mean, one thing we haven't talked about, and that's not really the point of today's episode, because we're talking about wide receiver one, right? But the tight ends are going to have a factor in this, and also the backs receiving out of the backfield. Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave, I expect them, if healthy, both to have a strong market share of Jordan Love's targets. And I think that we could see a lot of 12 personnel on the field. And if we see more 12 personnel on the field, we might only see our top two wide receivers, or Matt LaFleur is really going to mix and match things. He might like having a stack combination, having Kraft and Musgrave out there, and putting Musgrave out in the slot in like what would be like a big 11 personnel situation. And you've got Jaden Reed underneath in the slot, and you've got Christian Watson to take the top off. I mean, I can see a lot of formations like that if we're healthy this year. And he's really going to try to utilize and put people in the best position to succeed. But I think that's a factor. And I think that we're going to be more impressed with Josh Jacobs' receiving ability than what we saw of him in Las Vegas. I'm really curious to see how we utilize him in the pass game, and if it's similar to Aaron Jones and what his capabilities are.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good points too. Obviously, the tight ends and the running backs are going to catch a lot of passes too out of the backfield. And I mean, ultimately as well, like, I think most Packers fans probably think this is a wide receiver by committee, and totally justifiable by some of the numbers I was giving, and the PFF grades too by you. But if I had to pick one to lead the pack, I think
before we do that, Rob, let's do this. Let's play this game first. Who are your leaders? And maybe this gets the conclusion for you, but who leads the Packers in receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns? Who are your leaders in those three categories on, in early June 2024 right now?
In receptions and touchdowns?
Receptions, yards, and touchdowns. Who are your statistical leaders in each of those categories?
Yep. So I think I ended up taking the vote too. I put Christian Watson for yards. This is me assuming that he stays healthy. Receptions, I put Dontavian Wicks. I think he got a ton of receptions. I don't think he was the highest. But I just think based on, what he can do in man coverage, his route running abilities, I think they're going to try to find some more ways to be able to get him the ball. And then touchdowns. Man, this is tough. I'll go Romeo Dobbs. Just that connection with Jordan Love. A lot of those back shoulder, touchdowns in the corner of the end zone. Felt like I saw like 5 of those, quite a bit. So that leads me into that. What about you, Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, I think as I do this, and of course, as you said, the key to this exercise, and that we're assuming everybody's playing 17 regular season games or as many of those games as possible in this scenario. Obviously, somebody has a dreaded season-ending injury in week 4. This is all off the table, right? But I think that I agree with you that Christian Watson will be our leader in receiving yards. I think with his big play ability to get downfield, I could easily see him having 1,000 or 1,100 yard season. I don't think he's going to have one of those monster years where he has like 1,400 receiving yards or something. There's too many people to spread the ball to out on this team. But I could see him leading the team in yards at 1,000, 1,100 yards. I like Jaden Reed to lead the team in receptions. I think that he's going to continue to find the soft spots in the defense, and that's really where he excelled last year. I was super impressed with him as a rookie for his knack and ability to find the holes in the coverage, to sit down, and then as you've mentioned, once he's got the ball in his hand, to do something with
yards
it.
After catch, yeah.
I could easily see Jaden Reed maybe not breaking that 100 reception threshold, but having like 90 receptions this year and having an outstanding season. If he does that, he's going to be right there with Christian Watson for those receiving yards at 1,000, 1,100, because it's going to be almost impossible not to. And then touchdowns, you kind of stole my answer, but I like Romeo Dobbs or I like Christian Watson, and I like those guys for 2 reasons. Romeo Dobbs, I really see him settling in years 3 and 4 to that James Jones, like wide receiver 3 role on this strong team. I think he could have like a 2012 James Jones season, which that year, James Jones, I looked at the stats, he had like 784 yards, 64 receptions, and 14 touchdowns. He was just that go-to guy for Aaron Rodgers in the red zone. Had some big plays down the sideline from that season. I don't know. James Jones, Romeo Dobbs, they're very similar players to me, and I'm a huge supporter of Romeo Dobbs. I was banging on the drum for the Packers to draft him, and actually going into last season, I thought he could be wide receiver 1 for the Packers. Be very glad in this scenario for him to have that kind of season as wide receiver 3 for the Packers. But Christian Watson, I think, could easily be that guy with his length and speed to catch some of those touchdowns in the back of the end zone, to have a couple breakaways, and maybe end up in the double-digit category of 12, 13 touchdowns this season. So kind of a 2-for-1. But if I had to pick, I'll pick Dobbs because I'm cheering for him. So now it's time for us to pick our wide receiver 1. You can see we don't have like Christian Watson as the leader in all these categories. So Rob, if you had to pick a guy who's going to be Jordan Love's wide receiver 1 this year, who is number 1 on your list when it's all said and done?
Going on record. Watch out. Dun, 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 dun. Alex Magoo. Yeah. Yeah, I know. Man, I'm gonna get so much flack for that. No, I'm totally kidding. I am rooting for him, but if I'm going to pick this year, I'm gonna go ahead and say Christian Watson. If he can stay healthy, he figures out his leg asymmetry stuff. and the strength wise. The new strength and conditioning coaches can continue to work on his hammy all year and keep him good to go. He seemed to do that quite well last year with Christian McCaffrey, who struggled with injuries, the past 2-3 seasons, right? So there is something to that too as well. So he's got the big fast playability. He's going to take the top off of defense. I know that's going to open up a lot of other areas and opportunities for your other wide receivers, your Romeo Dobbs, your Jaden Reeds, right? For example, your Tavian Wicks, everyone, right? So he's just literally a different person when he's on the field and to this offense, and he's so important. So that's my answer. I think that he will stay healthy. I'm sure he'll miss a game or 2 or 3 or whatever, because it's the NFL and you can't really go through it too much without getting some, injuries in it. Even unless you're Romeo Dobbs and you play through 17 games, which is pretty awesome, and to be available and to do that. And that's one of those reasons why he does, have that great chemistry with Jordan Love. So it's going to be Christian Watson for me. Jordan, what about you, man?
Yeah, and why I agree that I think he might not lead the team in receptions. He's totally capable of putting together a 1,100 yard and 13 touchdown season, right? Which that would be a monster year and something we'd all be really excited about. I'm going Jaden Reed. I think he's a reception monster. I think he could have 100 receptions, and if he has those 100 receptions with that yard after catch, he's probably leading the team in yards as well. So you could see 100 reception, 1,100 yard season out of Jaden Reed. Might not lead the team in touchdowns, but again, probably going leader in 2 out of the big 3 statistical categories. And I really like him to take that year 2 leap. Also have a rooting interest in Jaden Reed playing his freshman year at Western Michigan, which is a cool little fact. He went on to Michigan State, which I'm less excited about as a Badgers fan, but I'm loving him in green and gold right now. So there you have it. Rob with Christian Watson, Jordan with Jaden Reed. A couple other notes as we close out today's episode. Jordan Morgan started at left guard while Jenkins has missed practice and OTAs. Dillard started at right tackle in Zach Tom's absence, which I found interesting, right? We've said publicly, the coaching staff has said that Jordan Morgan, we want him to be a tackle, right, and fail into guard. But it seems like a pretty good opportunity to throw him out there at right tackle and get those reps. A couple things, won't go too deep into it. They might just like Jordan Morgan on the left side better, whether that's at tackle or guard. The other factor is if you're going to play Andre Dillard, you're probably playing him at right tackle. He can swing, fill in for you at left, but right tackle is probably his best spot. So good opportunity for him to get some reps. LVN broke his thumb, but we shouldn't worry. He should be back for training camp. Seems like we've had a couple weird fluke injuries in this OTA offseason period with the torn pecs and the broken thumbs. But just a note there, Josh Jacobs wants Devontae Adams back in Green Bay, and Rob joked in our pre-show chat that there's a fat chance that's happening anytime soon. But I don't know, maybe if injuries don't go the way that we like for Christian Watson and we're really seeking that wide receiver 1 to come in for a 25 Super Bowl run, Packers are going to be flush with cap space next year and maybe a 2-year reunion at probably what will be a fair price for a wide receiver 1 with the way those contracts are going up. I don't know. That's the only way I see it, but I don't think it's happening. Bears are going to be on Hard Knocks. I'm very excited to see Caleb Williams and the new look Bears hopefully make a fool out of themselves on that show. Typically, the Hard Knocks team doesn't perform very well that season, or at least not up to the hype that they usually get coming out of Hard Knocks. I kind of expect that to be the scenario, but I am interested to have a peek inside that locker room. 2 other things. The Packers now have $30.3 million in post-June 1 cap space. And Rob, would you say that's like the 7th most available of any team?
Yep, seventh most in the NFL as far as cap space goes. Yep.
I don't know what they're going to do with it. Maybe they're going to sign some players to some extensions, and I'm pretty good with the cap, but I'm not sure if they can put some of that money into some signing bonuses or some extensions this year, and start to front load a little bit of that. The other thing is, I mean, they are capable of going out and getting somebody big that can still help this year's roster, or have some insurance for the deadline if we do have a gaping hole due to injury or something else. And then Michael Pratt, Bo Melton, and A.J. Dillon have been reported to be looking pretty good in OTAs. Excited about Pratt's potential. I still think he's going to be QB2. Bo Melton, that fits right into this discussion, and I think he's legit. And I mean, if he's as legit as we think he is at wide receiver 5, we're in really good shape. And A.J. Dillon is looking rocked out. He's going to be playing for a contract. I hope he has a great year, because if we have a 3-headed monster in the backfield, look out. So, but yeah, Rob, why don't you close it out, and let us know if you got any other notes for the Packers.
Yeah, no, just appreciate everybody coming on and listening to us again. We both genuinely appreciate it. We know that there's a lot of great Packers content out there. Just know that every Thursday we will be putting out new episodes on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. If you are listening on YouTube, make sure to go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button, and tell a Packer friend or two. Share it with your family. I know that I was at the dentist this last week, and I was talking to this guy, and he's like, we just started talking on Packer stuff, and it's like, I'm always looking for a really good new Packers podcast. And I said, hey, check out Sounds Gouda. And he's like, yeah, I'll go and check it out right now. And he did. So hopefully you liked our content, but really appreciate you guys sharing that with anybody you can. Make sure to follow us on X. It is below down here on the ribbon. But I am Robber79, ROBBERS 79. And Jordan is Olson Jord, OLSONJORD. And until next time, Packers fans, we really appreciate you coming on. Have a good morning, a good afternoon, and a good night. Take care, guys.
Been wanting this shit forever. I've been in the field with whatever they throw at me. Brush it off, pick myself up, moving on to the better. Okay. Hey.